government of the people, for the people, by the people.
Earlier today, a Broward County appellate court judge has upheld a previous ruling to ban the sale of Miami rap group the July Group's double platinum album, Nasty as They Want to Be, in Broward County.
So the intention was to go back and kind of touch on all the points, but I'm going to skip the point on the war on communism for another time. I'm going to go right to the war on terror just to speed things up a little bit. So here we go. The war on terror began on the 11th of September 2001. Despite claims to the contrary, there was a mountain of evidence alluding to these attacks. I highlight them in my Ramzi Youssef video. I would really like to believe that there was absolutely nothing the U.S. could have done to prevent this attack, but it just wasn't true. Sealing cockpit doors with the explicit instruction to pilots never to surrender control of their plane was long overdue. Americans seemed not to have any knowledge of the extensive history of hijacking around the world. U.S. planes were not excluded from that. I mean, really, man. Hijacking reached its peak in the 70s. Seems like somewhere you would learn your lesson. Hijackers don't want to die, they want their demands met. So in the case of a routine hijacking, the pilot simply lands the plane, never opening the door. This may seem Spartan, considering their history of actually killing passengers. So I don't agree that it should have been an instruction previous to 1995. After the arrest of Youssef, though, it is inexcusable that this wasn't the airline's dogmatic law. Knowing that every airplane up there was a possible weapon, no exceptions could be made. The lives of those on the plane being a small price to pay in order not only to avoid a World Trade Center type event, and the opportunity to catch a real-life terrorist when the plane touches down. That is, unless they killed themselves first. In any case, routine hijackings would have came to an immediate halt anyway with the sealed cockpit doors and new pilot instructions. I mean, what would be the point in hijacking a plane if your only option was to kill all the passengers and yourself before the plane touches down? Some twisted race against time? Alright, on to point number 4. I stated that the U.S. seems oblivious to the fact that no one likes them. That was a joke, by the way. They just don't care. The war on terror put a face on an invisible enemy. This enemy became known as Osama bin Laden. Of course, the Islamist radicals were going strong in the Middle East a long time before 2001. This didn't matter. The Americans were told that terror was a new threat. The new enemy. Osama bin Laden became the embodiment of all terror groups, in that, because of U.S. actions and policies in the Middle East, he was the enemy. Capture him, and terrorism stops. Wait, no. Overthrow the Taliban. I mean, we've come to overthrow Saddam. On second thought, let's just occupy the region. That's where the oil is anyway. But that's just a coincidence. In other words, there has been a perpetually declared war on something ever since World War II. It is as if the U.S. had solved all of its problems before then, and decided to take on the world preemptively to sidetrack potential problems. Is it just me, or does the U.S. seem to be a very, very paranoid place? Hell, the McCarthy hearings, part of the war on communism, were an attempt to weed out individual communists in America. What happened to their rights as citizens? To believe what they want to believe? Or even freedom of speech? They weren't even... forget it. By the way, the Patriot Act is essentially a government license to intercept communications without a warrant and hold them against you in court, which they couldn't do before. But they did. I mean, but they couldn't use them in court. They used them as a guideline. Anyway, even when the U.S. joined World War II, they set up a very not pleasant internment camp for Japanese American citizens. You go back even further. Alcohol prohibition in the 20s created a criminal world similar to the drug cartels of the 80s, except you have mobsters in our very streets. Of course, you had drug dealers in our streets, too, but, whatever, we effectively caused both scenarios. Seems to be a good thing that coca grows better in South America. So much for having solved backyard issues. Just take a look at corporations of the time period in question. Then the stock market crash. That's interesting. The economy took large bounds of recovery during World War II. Now, given there was an 11-year difference in the two events, the economy was crap the entire time. Maybe that voice of logical reasoning I mentioned was indeed present all of this time. However, obviously overruled by the one that said, war. As long as it is decently popular at home, it is great for the economy. And if we don't have war, we are left to our own economic and social devices, which are fragile. So if we allow, or even feed war a bit, we are okay, as long as no one catches us. So what's the score now? Am I anti-American? No. Would I like to leave? Not really. Is it because the U.S. is such a wonderful, free place? No. I was born here, plain and simple. This is my home, and I've been here this whole time. Had I been born in another country, I may have taken on a different perspective. It all seems to be relative, doesn't it? Are Europeans flocking to the U.S. by the boatload to escape their oppressive leaders? Hardly. And we aren't running afraid either. Hell, the euro has taken over the global economy anyway. Why trade down? The global consensus is that the American government is corrupt and wrong. Just read the news sometime. To deny that, considering even the negative attitude here at home, is retarded. The real ambiguous point to me is why, in every other country in the world, it is possible to rally the public to protest, and it causes a change, whereas in the U.S., when the immigrants took May Day off, which is celebrated in many countries around the world, by the way, and protested war for illegals' rights, America frowned. Shouldn't the American sense of pride and unity, the belief in the freedom of speech, and the general idea of making a difference cause them to admire these people? Instead, Americans depend on politicians to make all the necessary changes in laws, happy with their illusion of safety and freedom. But maybe that's the point. They just want to be comfortable and not worry. Personally, I'd prefer a more responsible government. Maybe they could have brought the case for the war in Iraq to a national vote instead of leaving it to a select few. I'd really prefer that when things weren't just right in the public's eyes, instead of waiting until November, they weren't afraid to unify and take a day off work to make a point. That would be very effective. The government will listen to its people without a vote, as long as the people act, make their voice strong, and effectively force the government to bend to their will. Which shouldn't be necessary. This is, after all, a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. But, by the way, I am purchasing land in the Bahamas, so all of you conservative extremists who offer me a one-way ticket to Pakistan or the Middle Eastern country of my choice, instead help me out with that, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.